Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to tonight's Nominations Committee virtual panel on getting to know current and former board members and regional coordinators so that you can have all of your questions answered about running for a board position with SPJLA, SPJ, and everything that entails with the positions that we have on the board, as well as the regional coordinator positions. My name is Ashanti Blaze Hopkins. I'm the chair of the Nominations Committee. I am also the president of SPJLA, which you probably just heard as I accidentally mentioned SPJLA. I would like to introduce our panelists for this evening. We have Jerry McCormick, who used to be on the SPJ board. We have Bailing Shah, who also used to be on the SPJ board. We have Daniela Ibarra, who is a current board member of SPJ. And we have Brian Horwath, who is a regional coordinator right now for SPJ. So thank you all of you for joining us this evening. I think we're going to have a really great spirited conversation about what it means to serve with SPJ. So I want to get started by first talking a little bit about what it means for you all to be able to serve with SPJ. Why was this something that you decided that you wanted to do or that you accepted? Because I know both Jerry and Bailing were actually appointed to the board. Let's talk a little bit about that. Can we start with you, Jerry?
Sure, absolutely. So for me, I'm very active in a different organization, NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. And we have, SPJ has a pretty active chapter here in San Diego. And I always meant to join, but just never got around to it. And when Matt was the president, he's a really good friend of mine. And I thought, it's time for me to join. And then he asked me to be on the board and asked me to spearhead a particular project, which was right up my alley, which was, trying to coordinate having SPJ chapters at historically Black colleges and universities. And so when he proposed that idea to me, I said, heck yeah, I'm on board. And so I helped do that. And for me, being a member of SPJ, it was just overdue. I've been in journalism for 30 years, and I'm sorry it took me so long to join. So that's pretty much my answer to that question.
Bailing?
Yeah, so I've been at Cal State Fullerton since July 2019 as Dean of the College of Communications. And the mission of the college has been for more than 30 years to advance democratic society. And so when Matt invited me to think about working with Jerry on this project as a national board member, I said yes, because I think that, public journalism and public education, in my opinion, are the two pillars undergirding the future of our democracy. And I've spent a lot of time in the public education space, and I wanted to spend even more time in the public journalism space beyond the work that I had done in higher ed. So working in tandem with Jerry, my assignment for Matt for the national board was to kind of have conversations with educators and students about streamlining the requirements to create SPJ chapters on college campuses. The requirements previously were quite complicated, and I'm not really a fan of inefficiencies. And so it was a project that was kind of in line with how I like to do things. And so it was a really good experience, and I'm glad I got to be a part of that. Before the national board service, I had also served with Matt on the board of the San Diego chapter of SPJ, because before coming to Cal State Fullerton, I was director of the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. So it was kind of nice to be back on a national board with San Diego friends and kind of extrapolating the good work that's been done in the SoCal area to a national level.
Daniela, I know you have a bit of a different experience because you ran for a position with the SPJ board. Can you talk a little bit about what was the decision-making process to even decide that you wanted to run? And then what did that mean for you when you did win?
Well, first of all, just kind of going back to my college days, I went to the University of North Texas and there was a chapter there. But for me, I felt like I'm a broadcaster, and I felt like, broadcasters really didn't have a space in SPJ. But then my mentor is Rebecca Aguilar, the current president. And so when she got involved, she started, nudging me towards getting involved with certain committees like the diversity committee. And once I was a part of that, I mean, I knew this was, my place to be, and I knew that I could provide an opportunity for other people like me, broadcasters that didn't really feel like SPJ was, for them. So that's why one of the things that I emphasized when I ran is that I want more broadcasters and more young people, because I feel like, people in college, you'll do it when you're in college and then just kind of drop out when you become a professional. So
Brian, you also ran for the SPJ board. Tell me a little bit about the experience that you went through as far as making that decision to run, and then how you felt when you did actually win.
Yeah, I think I wasn't used to putting my name out there and running for things. I'm not a politician certainly or anything like that, but it I think was a little bit unnerving, but it certainly wasn't as bad as I thought it might be. It was a pretty smooth process. I think anytime you win anything, I mean, I think that's a nice feeling. So, and really personally, I'm kind of learning as I go still. I really, it was an opportunity that was brought to me. I was told that there weren't at that time a lot of people interested in this regional coordinator position, and they were looking for folks who might be interested. And, I knew since I got involved with SPJ a few years ago, I really just kind of grew to understand how important SPJ and other organizations like SPJ are in supporting journalism and journalists across the country, and just the last few years. And this isn't a political statement, but just the last few years have really kind of underscored for me how important democracy is in our society, and what an important role that journalists play. So if in some small way, I can help support some of these great journalists in different parts of the country. Of course, in my region, we're talking about Region 11 on the West Coast. I think it's worth the time and effort.
I would like to talk a little bit about, once you all were in the roles that you had or currently have, what were the types of responsibilities that you started to see that's connected to your role? I want to start with Jerry. If you could explain the position that you've had on the board and talk a little bit about the responsibilities you had, and then also how you balance that with your full-time job and the work that you actually do to, get a paycheck. So, I would love to hear that part.
So I'm going to say I'm a little abnormal because I actually have 3 jobs. I work as a PIO in my day job, and then I teach at 2 colleges, including San Diego State University. And so for me, I will admit it was a little tough at times, but I managed to keep all the balls in the air. And so I was an at-large member like Baleen. We both came on at the same time, and she was a great support system for me. The main thing that I did was the HBCU project. And so for me, it was a matter of researching the schools, the curriculum, who had what, and then reaching out to the schools, asking if the schools were interested. And some schools were like, yeah, we're interested. And some schools didn't respond. And so it was a matter of then reaching out again, making phone calls, that sort of thing. And, I found it not to be cumbersome. It was just like, I guess I'm driven by passion and love for this organization. And so for me, it was just, this needs to be done, and I'm the one to step up and do it. So I found the time, and one thing I believe is, if you believe in something, you will make a way. And so for me, I made a way, and I made time to do it. And, and also we had very spirited board meetings at the same time. So those were interesting.
Baleen, can you talk a little bit about, your experience on the board? How did you, you're a dean, right? So obviously, you're busy. So how do you balance working, a very demanding job, and then also your role as a volunteer with SPJ?
Yeah, so I think really it's kudos to Matt for strategically selecting people with the right background for the right position. I already explained kind of what my portfolio was. And as a higher education administrator, my day job is basically sitting in a bunch of meetings and getting people to articulate a consensus about what the nature of the problem is, and then coming up with solutions, ideally based on some kind of data. And so that's exactly what this particular work group did. Matt had already identified some people. We put out a call for additional people. I set up some Zoom meetings. We got together once a month or so-ish, and we talked about what we saw as the challenges to setting up campus chapters. I threw together some survey instruments, sent it out to collect more data, and then we came together with some proposed solutions. And so I think it was just kind of a natural extension, if you will, of the skill set. I didn't think it was particularly onerous or anything like that in terms of having to balance the time. What did surprise me was, Jerry alluded to our very spirited and interesting board meetings. So when I agreed to do this, the deal was I would do this special project. And then I had heard from Matt that the board meetings were like once a quarter. And I was like, I can totally do once a quarter. The board meetings turn out to be monthly for like hours. And we would book some time for like 2-3 hours, whatever it was. And then inevitably they would run like 4 or 5 hours. But once I got used to that, then it was just a matter of calendaring and letting my husband know that I wasn't going to have lunch with the family and that they needed to bring me food anyway, because I was going to get grouchy otherwise. Right. So, but again, I think that was extenuating circumstances because of the pandemic. There were all these decisions that had to be made related to the conference that particular year and blah, 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 blah. So I don't think that is a typical kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Daniela, you're on the board right now. Talk a little bit about, one, what your role is in some of the responsibilities that you are facing and how you're balancing that. You are a broadcast journalist. How are you balancing, doing your day job and doing your volunteer responsibilities on the board?
Yeah, so I'm an at-large director, one of a couple of us. And like you said, I'm a broadcaster. I work here in Tulsa. And when I ran for the board, one of my little hesitancies I had is that, this is going to take a lot of time, but it really doesn't. I mean, like everyone kind of mentioned, we do have certain projects that we work on and projects that I'm passionate about. And like Jerry said, when you're passionate about something, it doesn't really feel like a lot of time is being invested into that. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there for people who might say, this is going to take a lot of time, because at least for me and my experience on the board, that's not been the case. And one of the projects that I've worked on is I'm an MMJ in Tulsa. And so, when that video came out of the MMJ getting hit, we were the first organization to jump on board with that. And as the only MMJ on the board, that was something I was super passionate about. I was glad that, our chapter in Georgia and that our president was on board with that. So that's something I've been involved with ever since, we've had those 2 town halls, and hoping we're planning a couple of more. So hope that hit everything that you asked.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Brian, you're not necessarily on the board. The regional coordinators don't hold a position on the board, but talk a little bit about, being a regional coordinator, what that has meant to you being in this role, and what some of your responsibilities are, how you've also been able to balance that with your day job. You're a print journalist.
Yeah. There's obviously day-to-day requirements of being a reporter, and you have to file stories and plan ahead, and sometimes it's busier than other times, but usually it's pretty busy. So I don't know, I think you just you just find the time to be able to do all these things. I think whenever I think that I'm pretty busy, it's kind of inevitable that I'll run in or talk to someone who is way busier than me and just seems to be handling it really, really well. So I mean, everyone's busy these days, so I think that's certainly that's part of it. But I think as far as the responsibilities, I think at first I was certainly nervous about how am I going to get all this done, how I'm going to make all these meetings and make all this happen. But I think one of the important things that somebody told me early on was just to make sure that you delegate some tasks and make sure that you're doing that, and I think just like anything else, you kind of settle into it. I think I'm still settling into it, but I think I think just, yeah, managing your time and scheduling and doing all those things. And I think, you know, somehow you'll find a way to get it done.
I think it's really clear to a lot of people that there's a lot of time and effort that goes from you into the organization if you're volunteering on the board or as regional coordinator. But what I want to hear from all of you is, what do you feel like you're getting out of being able to serve? And for those who have already served, what did you get from this experience after the fact? If you're looking back and saying, you know what, this is actually something that helped me, or that I could able to point back and say, I'm glad I did this. You know, I'd love to start with Daniela. You're on the board right now. What types of things do you think you're getting out of being able to serve in this role?
Well, for me personally, I feel like I've actually been able to, help spark change. I'm one of the younger members on the board, and I feel like, just covering board meetings, you see all these people and you're like, oh, maybe, they don't do a lot. But as a board member, I feel like I've been able to make change, specifically with the MMJ task force and the town halls that we've talked about. Because we've had, on the first one, I think we had over 100 members. And so that just made me feel good, knowing that, we were the first organization to really kind of own that. And we're still owning that when some other organizations maybe haven't as much. So that's one thing that I think people need to consider when, if they feel like they can help make a change, this is a great position to do that.
Jerry, what do you feel like you got out of serving on the SPJ board?
I feel like it helped me as a journalist, because it exposed me to different points of view from different people from across the country. Again, the board meetings were, how can I say this? It was a way for us to exchange ideas. We didn't always agree, but we were civil to one another. And it just showed how passionate we were about this organization. And to be honest, before I actually joined the organization, I just thought it was an organization for people who did not look like me. And then when I joined and realized all of the benefits of being an SPJ member, I started being an advocate for SPJ. It's like, it's great that you're a member of NABJ, AAJA, fill in the blank, minority organization, but you also need to be a member of this organization, and they both go hand in hand. So that was my ignorance, but it was an educational experience for me. And I want to make sure that other people have this experience as well.
Beiling, can you share what you feel like you got out of being on the board?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what I got out of it personally was kind of confirmation that that I can do things as one person that have a bigger impact than you would think one individual can do, right? I mean, the fact that I got to lead conversations that resulted in fundamental change in how university campus chapters are set up, and in doing so, like, help to eliminate barriers to the creation of student chapters. I think that is huge. And I think that's empowering, right? And another example is, you participate with this group of really passionate and experienced individuals who care so deeply, and things would happen. We would work together to craft statements. And people would have different perspectives on different statements, and sometimes how things are worded change slightly the meanings, right? And so to be able to participate collectively in conversations where the words that your organization is putting out reflects the organizational position on an important issue, but also reflects back on the organization, I think that was a really important experience. And then more selfishly, I think being in the higher education space, it was great for me to have this opportunity to build relationships with working journalists. And so, when there were questions from, say, faculty members about curriculum, I could say, well, no, that's not actually what the working journalists are using right now. So, like, why are we still teaching it this way? And a really specific example that I'll give for that was, we were in a period where the COVID protocols kept changing, and my broadcast journalism students were really, really, really upset that we wouldn't let them into the newsroom to do their broadcast journalism class. And they were like, but. And so I called Rebecca and just was like, okay, what is going on? Are you all like in the newsroom, or like, how are you? And so Rebecca kind of walked me through how people were doing it in the field, in the real world of journalism, and how important it was to be safe. And so then I was able to kind of take that back to the students and be like, look, I know you feel like you're not getting the experience you need to develop a professional reel, but I talked to my professional journalism friends, and here are the things that you can do, like do a stand-up that's outside, do this, do this, do this. And that kind of helped to calm them down. So from a really selfish standpoint, I think it gave me more credibility, or street cred, if you will, among my faculty and my students, that I'm not just some administrator sitting in an office, but that I actually legit know what's happening in journalism.
That's great. I do want to correct something I said. I said that the regional coordinator positions are not part of the board. They are part of the board. They're just not voting members of the board. So Brian, can you tell me a little bit about what you have been getting out of this experience? You're currently serving as regional coordinator for Region 11. What have you grown with as you have been in this position?
I think a couple different things. First off, I think it's just a seat at the table. It's, somebody said it at some point that access is power, and not necessarily that this is a powerful position, but I think I could make a call to the SPJ national president Rebecca Aguilar, tomorrow, if I had some question or some whatever. Certainly, so there's relationships that you can create there, and I think we all kind of get involved in our own little bubbles in our own pockets of the country, in our own markets, and sometimes maybe we don't understand what the major issues are going on around the country. So I think this is certainly a way where you're kind of plugged in, and what's being talked about, and what some of the concerns are that people have. I have to admit that I knew that the lack of diversity in journalism was an issue. I knew that. I didn't really understand until I was in this position and attended some of these board meetings and just listened to what people were saying, how big of an issue is, and just how we just desperately need more diversity in this field. So that's one thing that I think, just being in this position, I've learned a lot about that. And I think that's one example, but I think just selfishly, I think if I tell people I'm in a regional coordinator for SPJ, I have this leadership position. I think that's I think it feeds our ego maybe a little bit. Reporters have egos. They definitely do. We like to see our name out there. We like to see our byline there, whatever. So I think selfishly there's a little bit of that, but and then I think just networking is that's the reason why I got involved with SPJ in the first place in, I don't know, 2015 or whatever. Really was just about networking, but I think it offers a lot more than that. But certainly being able to just establish connections and relationships with different people, I think that's valuable.
I know some of you mentioned diversity, and I want to kind of call to attention that every single member, every single one of these panelists here are very diverse, come from very diverse backgrounds, ages, different areas of the country. Daniela, I think you are one of the youngest board members that SPJ has ever had. So, I'd love to talk a little bit more about diversity, right? What has that meant to all of you to be able to help the organization move into 2022 as far as how it looks, making sure that we're being representative of the journalism community? Baylang, your hands up.
Yeah, I really need to just jump in and say something about that, because the ways in which we talk about diversity really has to change, right? And I'm just going to kind of borrow your example when you said that all of the panelists are diverse. The word diverse needs to apply to groups of people and not to individual people, right? So I am not diverse, like this group is diverse, right? Because I think a lot of times in journalism and other professions and in society at large, when people think diversity or diverse, they're thinking of a deviation from the upper middle class, cis, white, heterosexual male. And that means that there's a whole group of people who are disenfranchised when we talk about diversity and feel that it's an exclusion of them, or worse, a replacement of them, right? And so I think part of what we need to do in journalism and media in general is kind of rethink how we use some of the words. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really great point. Jerry, did you want to also chime in to this part of the conversation?
She said it all. But that another reason, and I kind of said it before, I thought SPJ was just for white people, and I'll just put it out there. And I didn't think I would be welcomed in this group, and boy, was I wrong. And that was my ignorance. And I'm also a twofer. I'm also gay, in addition to being Black. And so, that was another reason why I didn't think I would belong in this group. But this group welcomed me with open arms. And more importantly, they welcomed my experiences and my thoughts, which, was very important to me. And so that being said, if anybody's on the fence about joining or running for a position, feel free to reach out to me, because this group has a lot of benefits, and it's changing. It's changing for, I think, the better. I mean, again, I watched this group from a distance, and for a long time, it was just old white people. And now, looking at people like Daniela gives me hope, because some of us are getting older and we're going to go to the great journalism newsroom in the sky. And it just helps to know that people like Daniela will be around to keep the fire stoked in the printing presses. Well, again, I just showed my age. We'll keep the websites or whatever is going to happen in the future running. So that makes me happy.
Daniela, I would love to hear you weigh in on this as the youngest SPJ board member, because I want to just emphasize that I tell my students this all the time. I'm a professor, that diversity isn't just about race. It is about age. It is about socioeconomic background. It is about country of origin. It is about able versus disabled-bodied people. It is about all of these things, right? Sexual orientation, sexual gender identification, right? So I would love for you to talk a little bit about, being one of the younger members on the board. What has that meant for you to be able to have that seat at the table, be able to have that voice?
Actually, before we hopped on the meeting, I knew this was going to be a question that came up. And one of the things that just kind of came to my head is, in college, I was on the board for NAHJ. I was a student representative, and there, I had a seat at the table, but, we didn't get to really vote on things. But now that I'm, I guess, an adult, I've graduated college, I feel like, now I have a seat at the table, and I do say things that, some people who might be a little bit older than me don't think about. Which I think has been helpful. And I've never felt like, someone's like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're only 24, like I felt very welcomed. And then just to touch on diversity as a group, I mean, our board, I'm not sure if it's the most diverse, but I think it's safe to say that we're the most diverse. And I kind of wrote it down because we have, out of the 9 board members, we have 6 people of color, 5 of us are NHA members, we're Latino. We have a board member who's transgender. Our president's the first Latina president. So I feel like, that in itself is just showing how much of a stride that we've made, but that doesn't mean we should stop there.
Yeah, it's the beginning, right? It's the floor, not the ceiling, right? Brian, what about you? What do you think about the strength of diversity when it comes to the board and the importance of that?
I think it's very important. And, I think, as a white male, white heterosexual male, I think I'm sorry to say that far too often, we do tend to think about diversity, and it's sort of, it's this zero-sum game and it's not at all. We all benefit from more diversity. I don't think there's any question about that at all. And we don't we don't have to be afraid or worried about that. It's really, really unfortunate, I think, that so much of our national politics right now are kind of based around these really wacky sort of, replacement theory. You guys have all heard it. It's just it's a bunch of nonsense. We benefit from diverse ideas. We benefit from being in contact and working with people from all different kinds of diverse backgrounds, and it's very important. I think also, and I'm just talking about, I'm getting a little bit off track, so I'm talking about society in general here. I think there's this idea that we've come a long ways. I think we have in many respects, but there is so much further to go. I mean, there's so much more work to do. So I'm in Las Vegas, and I cover the casino industry. And, I'm working on the story right now about diversity on the boards of directors of some of these big casino companies. And, I think I went over, I think there was, 50 some spots on these boards for the biggest casino companies in Las Vegas. I think there was one black male, so I mean, think about that. I mean, it's really, and those are the decision makers. A lot of times, you'll see companies or organizations, and they can put someone front and center. Well, this person is our diversity officer, so we care about diversity. Let me see your decision makers. Let me see the people who are really calling the shots here. Who are they? What do they look like? What are their backgrounds? So I think, I think, I love where SPJ is going in that regard, but I think there's just, in so many different areas of our society, there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, and I think in hearing this, I'm hoping that SPJ members listen to this, and folks that were maybe hesitant about running will change their mind and say, you know what, I can do that. I can make a difference. I can, run for those positions. I can have a seat at the table. I can have a voice to be able to move the organization forward. I think that's so important. Bailing, your hands up.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that diversity does come with all of these different dimensions. And in fact, when Matt first asked me to be on the board and said that he had also asked Jerry, my first response to Matt was, you can't have two San Diegans. This is a national board. Like, what are people going to think? You're from San Diego. I was from San Diego. Jerry's from San Diego. And so we actually had a conversation about regional diversity. And was that okay that there were 3 of us from San Diego? Because I was genuinely concerned, right? And then the other thing I just wanted to say was, Brian, if any of those boards of casinos need like a really outspoken Asian American woman Californian, send them to me, because I would be a great board member and I'd be happy to drive to Las Vegas for them.
Little plug by Bailing. Love it, love it. Daniela, your hands up.
Yeah, I just had one more comment that just kind of came up to me while we were talking about this. Like I said, our board is very diverse, and it's not just, we have so many people of color, so many people from different backgrounds, but it's already influenced some of the decisions we made. One of the ones that I thought of was when we went ahead and decided our conference for next year. Our 2 options that we were really weighing between, well, 3 of them, but the big 2 were Las Vegas and Arizona. And, I love Arizona. I've always wanted to go and, see it. But for me, one of the reasons I spoke out against it is because, like, I just graduated college 3 years ago. I know how expensive it is to go to conferences. And out of the 2 options, I'm going to NHA this year. Yes, it's in Las Vegas. And yes, I'll go to Las Vegas again next year. But I know for students who this might be their first conference, that's the cheaper option. And one of the other things that another board member brought up that I was so glad that he was there is Israel. He brought up that, he wasn't comfortable with going to Arizona just because, some of the issues politically there, specifically against Hispanic people. And I thought I was so glad that he was there, because I didn't even think about that. And I'm Hispanic. So I think that speaks to how important it is to have that diverse background that, we're all willing to speak up and show how it influences us.
Yes, just having those different diverse experiences too, really helps to shape the decision-making process, right? So Israel's not there, that's not a perspective that you hear. You're not there, that's not a perspective that everyone hears about the cost, right? So it is important to be able to, make room for people on our board as we move forward so that we can be a better board, right? I mean, that's really the point, is we're trying to make this organization better that we all care about so much. I would love to hear from all of you, kind of like your pitch to anyone who is maybe on the fence right now about potentially running for a board position. What would you say to them to get them to, come on the other side, click on the link that says declare your candidacy? What would you say, to make them get to that decision? Let's start with Daniela.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is to find a mentor that's on the board. That way you can actually get, it's one thing to ask the questions here in a forum like this, but I mean, you want to be real, you want to get the real answer. So find a mentor on the board who's either currently on the board or has served on the board. And then circling back, like I said, one of the biggest hesitancies I had is this was going to be a huge time commitment. Luckily for me during this term, our board president has been really good about, keeping us in the loop and making sure that things don't run over. And, on task force that I've been on, they're really they're really good about making sure that, we stay within the time limit. So, and it's not an everyday thing, like sure, you're answering emails every day, but I mean, you put into this as much as you want to put into it, but also it's not a huge time commitment. And I think that's one of the things that, especially young people, that's what I hear a lot is that, oh, I don't have time to do that. Or, oh, and also, as a younger person, I'm in my second job. I just graduated college 3 years ago. Just because, this is your first job or your second job doesn't mean that you don't have the qualities to run. So one of the things that one of my mentors always told me is don't count yourself out just because, you don't have X, Y, and Z. And if you want to make change and you have the passion for this, run because we need you.
Yeah, I think Daniela is living proof of that, right? Brian, same question.
Yeah, I think my pitch would be, in simplest terms, I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, it's not like a lifetime commitment, but certainly I would say, I think that you're going to find that there's people who you can lean on and bounce things off of and ask questions and maybe who can kind of talk you off the ledge. If you start this position and you're like, wait a minute, what did I do? Why did I do this? At first. But I think those people are there. And then I would also just say, if in some way, small or big, you can kind of make a contribution to this profession of journalism. What's a better time than right now? I mean, we absolutely need people who care about journalism to step up in whatever way that they can step up. It's a very important time, to do that. So maybe in some small way, maybe you can make a contribution. I mean, why not?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a time that our country needs SPJ probably more than ever. Bei Ling, what is your pitch to someone who's on the fence?
Gosh, I feel like I don't have any unique advice that's special or different, right? I mean, if not you, who? If not now, when? Right? All the platitudes. If you care, you're qualified. And I think that there was some other one, but now I forgot because it's so late in the day. I just think it's an amazing opportunity to truly make a difference. And ultimately, as much as I think journalists make a difference in their jobs, serving on SPJ is an opportunity to make a difference for journalism. And that impacts everyone's jobs, not just your own, right?
Yeah, I love what you just said. If you care, you qualify, right? Like that's like a t-shirt that I think the nominations committee should have made and sent to everyone. If you care, you qualify, right?
I actually think that's a trademark slogan from another organization I'm involved with. So yes, it probably is an actual
a t-shirt. Okay.
Somewhere. Yeah. Ask not what SPJ can do for you. Ask what you can do for SPJ.
Yes. Jerry, I would love to hear what your pitch would be to someone who's on the fence. And then Daniela, I will get to you.
I would say be the solution. Because a lot of people, feel like they want to do something, they want to help the organization and they just don't know how. And so, again, I said earlier that I just thought this was an organization full of white people. Well, little black me joined, and now it's not full of white people. Now there's me. And then I brought my perspective and my experience, because I'm a former broadcast and print journalist. So I brought both of those perspectives, and now I'm in PR, to this organization. So I brought a wealth of knowledge and experience to it. But imagine if I just stayed on the fence and didn't join, then none of this would have happened. So sometimes you just got to dive in, and make a difference. And like Baleen said, one person can make a difference. And this is the organization that can. I mean, a lot of our colleagues right now are really busy covering this tragedy that happened earlier today, but know that there's solidarity and love and brotherhood or sisterhood in SPJ. So that would be my elevator pitch.
Yeah, and I also want to just take a moment. I meant to do this at the very top, but I want to take a moment to recognize what is going on in Uvalde in Texas with the mass shooting that happened today. I know there are probably a lot of journalists who are on their way there to cover this, or who are covering it in their newsrooms now, or who are trying to unplug and take a break from what has been the third mass shooting that we've seen in this country in the last couple of days. So I just do want to take a moment to just sit with that and understand that that is happening in the background of what we're trying to do today. But I also think that running for this board and having a voice in SPJ and being able to speak to these same issues that are impacting our fellow journalists as they go to cover this and are putting their mental health in jeopardy, to be able to bring the news to everyone, it's even more important now than ever to be able to serve on boards like SPJ, to be able to have that voice, to be able to be the group that says, we are here for you as you all finish covering this and the aftermath settles and your mental health is in jeopardy, right? We are here for you for networking opportunities if you need to get out of the industry because this is too much, right? So I just want to take a moment and kind of, sit with that and recognize that that is happening in the backdrop of what we're doing today. Daniela, your hand was up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you for taking a moment to talk about that. I'm from San Antonio, and I know we have a great San Antonio chapter, and I'm sure all of them are either headed that way or covering it from their newsrooms. So thanks for that. But on a lighter note, one of the quotes that I thought of, in college, it just kind of stuck with me. But when Obama was like, "Don't boo, vote." Like, if you want to make change, speak up and become a leader. So that might just be for younger people who think of that, that might be just a little way to push them to run.
Yeah, one of my favorite Obama quotes, actually: "Don't boo, vote," right? Don't boo, get involved, right? Don't lament that things aren't changing the way you want them to. Get involved so you can have the seat at the table and have that voice to make that change that you want to see, right? Baleen, your hand's up.
I was wondering if we were going to answer Adam's very good question in the chat. Is it okay if I segue there?
Absolutely. Please, by all means. And let me also say, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. You can also put it in the chat. We do have John Schertzer right now who's kind of monitoring both to make sure that we do respond to those questions. So go ahead, Baleen.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I shared when I was on the SPJ board is that SPJ National was not my first board. I've been on like 36 different boards nationally and regionally. And I think from that experience, your absolute best recruitment tool and training grounds for board membership is the committee structure, right? So SPJ National Board, has there's all these committees that volunteers do. And that is honestly training of that committee leadership level. Ideally, those are the folks that you would train and prep for the next level of leadership, and then making sure that you recruit into committees so that they get hands-on experience working on a committee, then leading a committee, and then running for the board. I think that experience is really important for individual candidates who become board members, but I also think that speaks to the importance and the responsibility that all organizational leaders have to make sure that the committee experience is a positive one. And by positive, I don't mean like every volunteer gets to have everything they want. I mean, an experience where volunteers are respected in terms of how their time is used, how their expertise is taken into account. And if that initial volunteer experience at a national committee level or at a local chapter level or, you know, the professional interest section level, if those experiences are positive, that generates engagement and makes people want to get more involved at a higher level of leadership. So that's my answer to Adam's very good question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mei-Ling, for that. Jerry, go ahead.
So my answer to that question would be pay attention to the journalists in your area. And I'm about to toot my own horn, so toot toot. Matt and I have been friends for a very long time, and he noticed that I was very passionate about journalism and particularly students in journalism. I have a hashtag on Twitter, Jerry's Kids, where I follow my students and I nag them about, you know, their homework and, you know, internships and that sort of thing. So he saw that I was very passionate about that. And he said, why don't you bring that passion to SPJ and help us solve this particular issue that we're having? And so clearly, you know, he said the right thing because I joined. And so there are other journalists out and about in your community who are doing something to further the cause of journalism. So why not recruit them? If someone's working with college students, hey, what you should be over here. If someone is trying to, you know, increase circulation or very active in the community or helping further the cause of journalism beyond their job, those are perfect people who belong in SPJ. If they are just a natural leader, they are the people that belong in it. Well, SPJ, everyone's welcome, let me say that. But for leadership roles, natural leaders just automatically rise to the top. So that would be my answer to that question. And thank you for asking it, Adam.
Thank you so much for that. I do want to ask something of all of the panelists that I'm sure many people are wondering as they're making this or trying to make this decision to run for office for SPJ. How much is this going to cost me, right? Do I got to fly, use on my own dime to go to meetings? Do I got to fly on my own dime to go to conventions? Can you all talk a little bit about, you know, how the SPJ board supports those types of things, those you know, expenditures that you have to make to travel because of SPJ? Talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Well, I was an at-large member during the pandemic year, so I traveled nowhere and spent nothing. And I'm not at all bitter about that.
Yeah, you don't sound bitter at all.
No, I'm not at all bitter that conference in New Orleans was canceled so that we wouldn't all catch COVID and die.
Yeah, I mean, same here. I didn't spend a dime. But yeah, Mei-Ling and I were on the board at the same time. The only thing it cost me was time, but it was time well spent.
Daniela.
So it hasn't cost me yet, but you know, I will go to the conference this year, and SPJ does foot the bill for, you know, your travel expenses. Here, I have a list right here. I know for sure, like for at large, I get 15, president-elect gets 4K, and then the president gets 10K. I have a little handbook and I wish I would have pulled it out and had it ready, but you know, they do help with those expenses of getting you from, you know, home to the conference.
Right, which is huge. You know, I think maybe even some people, they may be hesitant to run for the board because they're like, I don't have the money for all that, right? But to hear that, you know, the at-large directors get 1,500 as a kind of travel stipend, you know, and some of the other board members get much more, 10K for the president, secretary, I think for 4,000. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and that was a nice surprise for me because when I ran, I had no clue that I had any of that. And then when we had our training, I was like, oh, that's nice to know because that was going to be expensive.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's another question in the chat that I want to go ahead and read. It says, some of you have mentioned that you serve on other boards and been members of other organizations. What can SPJ do to collaborate with other organizations such as NABJ, AAJA, and AHJ to get more of their members involved and in our leadership? I've talked to members from some of these organizations who didn't think they could join SPJ because they were members of these other organizations. Can we do more to fix that perception? Why don't we start with Brian? Brian, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I think that's another great question. I mean, I think just in general, and I'm of course including myself in this. I think that there's things that we can do to recruit better and recruit more people. I know, I think a lot of that just comes from making the ask and reaching out to people, I guess. But that's a great question, and not one that I have a concrete answer for, but I'd be interested at what you all have to say about it.
Jerry, I know you came from NABJ, so you have direct experience with this. Can you talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
Yeah, well, let me just say this. I'm from the South, so I'm going to use a colloquialism. That dog don't hunt for me. We're journalists, and you should do your research, period, to see if you qualify for a group. But if some people do have that perception, I think, again, I had the perception that this was a group of white people, and would I be welcome? And the thing of it is it's not, it's for everyone. And so, having a diverse board like this board and then our board, and having us out there and people seeing, well, hey, there's someone that looks like me as part of the board, maybe I should join. I've also tried to recruit people myself, like, hey, they're great, come on, they have all of this. SPJ is one of the most powerful journalism groups there is. You'd be crazy not to be a part of this. They have resources, or sorry, I don't know why I'm saying we have resources that other groups don't have. And so as a journalist, you need to tap into everything possible. And so as far as the perception, I think just having a more diverse board, having, people in leadership, and just letting people know that everyone's welcome, that's what you do. So that would be my answer.
Thanks, Jerry. Bailing, your hand's up.
Yeah, I would answer that a little bit differently, because I think typically income is finite, right? You earn money, you only have so much of it that you can spend at discretion. So in some respects, the different journalism groups compete against each other for people's limited amount of discretionary dollars that they have available to spend on memberships, right? And so I think any kind of collaborative activity across these groups that clearly should be aligned in their interests, any kind of collaborative activities need to be activities in which people get more bang for their buck and not request to spend more bucks, right? So here's what I mean by that. Like NAHJ and NABJ have a joint conference. That's more bang for your buck, right? You can belong to either organization, go to one conference, both organizations are there, and presumably it's not going to be a segregated conference, so you can go to whichever panels you want to. SPJ is doing the same, right? With the convention in November, we're partnering with 2 collegiate media groups, right? And again, anybody who's a member of any one group can go to any of those sessions. And so I think it's things like that where people can, for the same cost or the single membership, they can have access to opportunities offered by other organizations, as opposed to being put into a position where now 4 other journalism organizations are going to ask me for money to join them also, right? Because that is probably not attractive.
Yeah, understood. I know I'm being mindful of time. It's now 6:54. So I want to give all of you an opportunity at a closing thought before I kind of wrap up, give some information about next steps if you're trying to run, and all of those good things. So if we could start with Jerry, and then I'll go down the line, but just some closing thoughts, maybe 30 seconds or so, about being on the board, about running for a board position, anything that you think could be an inspirational.
Do it. Just do it. I'm going to steal the Nike campaign. Just do it. I mean, it's worth your time. It's worth your effort. If you're passionate about journalism, this is where you belong. That's it.
Bailing.
That was the former TV producer in me.
I love it. Bailing.
Yeah, I have nothing additional to add. I support what Jerry just said, so I'll just stop.
Okay, Daniela.
I'll repeat what I said earlier. Don't boo, vote, make change, run.
And Brian.
Yeah, the people on this panel are accomplished and brilliant. Look at the people on the board for SPJ and look at certainly the president, Rebecca. I mean, these are really smart, capable people. I don't know if I fit in with that group, but if I can do it, I think you can do it as well.
Brian, you 100% fit in. Absolutely. I want to thank Jerry, Beiling, Daniela, Brian for being on this panel tonight. I think it was extremely helpful. I do want to share with all of the folks that are attending and the folks that will be watching. One, this is going to be recorded, or this is recorded. So we will be posting the recording to this on the SPJ Election Central website, which I want to, John, if you could pop that into the chat, that would be really, really helpful. And then I also want to share that if you are ready to run, the link that I just put in the chat, that is the link for you to declare. Okay, you have until September 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern time to declare. And the positions that are currently on the ballot for this year: president, vice president, secretary treasurer, and regional coordinators for regions 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9. So if any of those positions interest you, right, we want you to run. There are some different requirements for some of these positions, and you'll find all of that information on SPJ Election Central. So I encourage you to go to that link that John put in the chat, familiarize yourself with that information. You can also email, there is an email on that website. That email goes directly to myself and John Schertzer. I check my email like a crazy person, and so I respond really quickly. So if you have questions that we didn't answer here, please, 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 by all means, reach out. We want you to run. We want you to be a part of the board. We want you to help move the organization forward, and we want you to have a seat at the table and have a voice. So again, thank you all so much for coming. We appreciate all of you. And we will also be having 2 more of these. If you happen to have missed this one, if you're watching this right now, we have 2 more coming up in June. So keep an eye out on SPJ's Twitter account. They will be pushing out the information about those additional panels that will be happening for both 6 p.m. in the Central Time Zone and 6 p.m. in the Eastern Time Zone, so we can make sure that everybody has an opportunity to attend across the country. Beiling, you have your—
I just thought of something smart to share to encourage people to run, which is this. Because journalism is one of the bulwarks of democracy, we need to model democratic processes as an organization. And real democracies have multiple viable candidates on the ballot. So let's show the country how a real democracy is run.
Absolutely. We want to have contested positions for every single position we have on the voting ballot. We do. I would also like to draw attention to Rebecca Aguilar is on the call. She said, if anyone wants to run, you have questions, she said to reach out to her. Her email is in the chat. You all can do this. You can do this. So I leave you with those words. Have a good evening. Be careful with yourselves. Take some time for your mental health, and we will see you all next month. Thank you.